Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is a huge honor for me to welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Darlie O. Koshy, Chairman INTACH Major General L.K. Gupta, Member Secretary Dr. C.T. Misra, and all the distinguished guests present here to the 14th Popul Jaikar Memorial Lecture. Imagining the future of golden birds, Wop and Woof. You'll have to wait as and when the lecture unfolds to demystify what the title actually means. The lecture, as you know, was started to honor the memory of Srimati Popul Jaikar, one of the founding members of INTACH and whose passion for heritage conservation is legendary. May I request Dr. Koshy, Chairman INTACH and Member Secretary INTACH, to please come up to the table in front. Thank you. We will now welcome our guest speaker with flowers and an INTACH publication. May I request General Gupta and ma'am to do the honors, please? Before we go ahead with the lecture, I would request Dr. Koshy to please release a few INTACH publications along with Chairman and Member Secretary. The first in the series of publications to be released is INTACH Journal of Heritage Studies. It is only the red one, sir. It is a novel space of academic expression for experts, scholars, and researchers to create an intellectual dialogue and discussion on matters concerning the heritage and culture of India. The 2024 issue of the INTACH Journal of Heritage Studies, Volume 1, Issue 2, explores the theme Heritage and Ecology, where heritage encompasses architectural, intangible, natural resources of significance, while ecology refers to the relationship between living beings and their physical and socio-cultural environment. The second is the Heritage Awards for Excellence in Documentation of Unprotected Heritage. This publication serves as an invaluable resource offering insights into the identification, mapping, and documentation of heritage sites. The evolution of these sites and settlements is vividly illustrated through detailed descriptions, photographs, and architectural renderings. The third is Historic Gardens of India, Volume 1. Heritage listing and documentation has been one of the main activities of INTACH since 1984 as a first step towards heritage conservation. The listings are often referred to by students, researchers, professionals, and various government departments. This publication, the first volume, covers about 250 gardens in Delhi, Punjab, Haryana, Chandigarh, and Uttar Pradesh. And then we have the 13th Popul Jaikar Memorial Lecture, The Importance of Reading Puranas, which was delivered by Dr. Bibek Deberoy last year. Then we have INTACH Lecture Series 2022-23, This is an ongoing lecture series that was started in 2016. And this is a compendium of all the lectures that took place in the mentioned year. Ladies and gentlemen, we at INTACH work extensively with young children and students across the country, and the next publication is a part of that program. It is called Maloya Braids a River Journey, No Assam, Story Cum Coloring Book. This story cum coloring book follows the journey of Maloya, her mother, her cousin, through the state of Assam along the Brahmaputra. Through her journey, she discovers the rich cultural and natural heritage of Assam. INTACH comes out with a quarterly newsletter which is dedicated solely to its young audience, called the Young INTACH Newsletter. And this is the Young INTACH Newsletter 22-23 that have been translated into Gujarati, Marathi, Punjabi, and Assamese. And it consists of the best articles, activities, and maps on each aspect of heritage. There's also a plan to translate it into 6 more languages in future: Kannada, Malayalam, Odia, Bengali, Tamil, and Telugu. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. May I now request Chairman INTACH, General Gupta, to please say a few words.
I take this opportunity to welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Darlie or Koshy, and members of the audience. As you would know, that Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage was established to spread awareness and acquire expertise for conservation of India's vast and varied heritage that goes back to thousands of years. 2024 is the 40th year of inception of INTACH. It has over the years established benchmarks for pioneering an integrated and inclusive approach to heritage awareness and its conservation. As a result, today, its expertise is sought both at the level of policy formation and implementation. We have a strong and growing network at the grassroots level in the form of INTACH chapters, and there are over 220 chapters spread across the length and breadth of the country. The expertise of INTACH in heritage conservation is acknowledged both nationally and internationally. Just to give you an example, M.F. Hussain had painted 2 walls 50 feet by 10 feet, masonry walls in this WHO building. In 2018, INTACH was asked to bring down these walls, store those walls, and then they were re-erected in 2023. You know how fragile is masonry and to preserve its paintings. So they are now been reinstalled. Since you live in Delhi, go and visit. It's a landmark work reported anywhere in the world, such a work in the world of INTACH. That's how INTACH's expertise is valued. INTACH that you know of today was a brainchild of handful of visionary and progressive founders. Amongst them, one of the most eminent was Srimati Pupul Jaika. Her love and passion for Indian crafts is well known, and she was bestowed the Padma Bhushan in 1967 as a recognition of her contribution to India's cultural heritage. Thus, befittingly, to honor her memory, we host Pupul Jacker Memorial Lecture every year on 18th April, which is the World Heritage Day, and today is the 14th year of holding Pupul Jacker Memorial Lecture. As in the past, we are very fortunate this year too that we have an illustrious and distinguished speaker to share his thoughts with us, Dr. Koshy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
He is an author, speaker, textile and design management strategist. I now invite Manisha Singh ji, Director Cultural Affairs, to formally introduce Dr. Koshy to the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again. Ladies and gentlemen, India had enjoyed 25% share of global trade in textiles in the early 18th century, as is stated by Dr. Shashi Tharoor in his book, An Era of Darkness. However, this was destroyed and decimated during the colonial rule. The company's own stalwart administrator, Lord William Bentinck, wrote, "The bones of cotton weavers were bleaching the plains of India." From such a dire state of golden birds, warp and woof, which was visible in the post-independent India, to resurrect the lost glory was the arduous task to which Shrimati Popul Jaikar was drawn into for nearly 5 decades, since early 1950s. Her responses included dreaming big, nurturing people, and building institutions so that the mission of revival of textile heritage goes forward unabated. Today, there is an unprecedented strategic opportunity emerging for the Indian textile and fashion to move into a new orbit of sustainability for the well-being of the planet and people in line with the SDG goals. And to make this possible, we need to reimagine the future of textile fashion ecosystem to regain India's leadership as the country races to celebrate 100 years of independence. Dr. Darlie Koshy's illustrious professional career in handlooms, textiles, and fashion, and later with design and skill development, spans over 45 years. He holds a Ph.D. in management from IIT Delhi, MBA from QSAT, and faculty fellowship from FIT, Fashion Institute of Technology, New York. As the 5th director of the National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad, and his tenure of almost a decade or 3 terms, whatever you might take it, as the board member of the World Design Organization, they are noted for transformations by bringing in IT, technology, and advanced research to design education and later in skill education as well. India's first National Design Policy 2007, spearheaded by Dr. Koshy, resonated with Designed in India, Made for the World, catalyzing spread of design education and promotion. Before his stint at NID, Dr. Koshy was a member of the founding team of NIFT, New Delhi, as professor and chairperson of fashion management. Dr. Darlie Koshy is currently a strategic advisor to the World Crafts Council and a mentor for national level skill development initiatives. He is a recipient of several national and international awards. In fact, the list is long and formidable, and it is not possible for me to read out everything because of constraints of time. So I will just mention that he was also the recipient of the highest civilian award of the government of Italy, which is called the Star of the Italian Solidarity, the Fonzadian Venosta for contribution to design and development. These are all very well-known and acclaimed design awards in Europe. And as I've said, the list is, I have the whole list here, and it's formidable. So instead, ladies and gentlemen, I will now request Dr. Koshy to please come up on stage and deliver the 14th Pupul Jaikar Memorial Lecture. Dr. Koshy, over to you.
A very good evening. I must first of all thank each one of you, because I know how humid and hot, not very humid, but hot day it has been. So traveling a long distance and being here today for this lecture is a great gesture on your side, and I'm very grateful. I'm going to not use actually a presentation, because Manisha ji wants this to go into print in their magazine or publication, and therefore it has to be a text which is sort of vetted and sanitized. So I'm going to stick to mostly the text, but just to break the monotony of hearing me, I would like to also use occasionally a divider to get your attention back into the talk. Occasionally I may sip water because I'm really thirsty with all this heat. Plus, as my throat has been one of the most used organ, obviously it gives up. Esteemed Chairman of INTACH, Major General L.K. Gupta ji, distinguished Member Secretary Dr. C.T. Mishra ji, Manisha ji, august audience, consisting of many stalwarts from different walks of life, faculty members, colleagues, and dear friends from textile and fashion fraternity. Thank you very much for taking out your valuable time to attend this lecture. To be invited by INTACH, an organization I hold in high esteem, for the 14th Pupul Jaikar Discourse or lecture in memory of a true visionary on this World Heritage Day is indeed a great honor and privilege. Apart from well-known contributions of Mrs. Pupul Jaikar for the revival and growth of handlooms and preservation of our country's heritage and cultural legacy, her long-range vision, which I call as hyper-seeing capability, it's a word used in architecture, but I like to use this, that she had this hyper-seeing capability in setting up futuristic institutions, and that made me really awestruck. I have been part of two such iconic institutions, National Institute of Design, which was set up in 1961, and NIFT, which was initiated in 1986. It is interesting and not surprising that when Mrs. Pupul Jaikar was invited to speak at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, she had pointed out, I too have been also responsible for the building of a large number of cultural, social, and economic institutions in the country. She made it extremely, emphatic. It was indeed a fortunate serendipity to have met her in person at the formal launch of NIFT. At the formal launch of NIFT in 1986 at the Hotel Samrat, along with Matan Singh, her protege, and also Ram Nivas Mirtha, who was the textile minister, and Krishna Kumar, the Union Textile Minister, but State Minister. Not long after, my career took a new turn, and by December 1987, I had joined NIFT New Delhi. As a tribute to Pupul Jaikar, when NIFT opened its first campus at Hoskas, the main hall at the foyer was named after her. And that was indeed as a suggestion from all the senior faculty members. It may be recalled that Pupil Jaker was the chairperson of Calico Museum and the National Institute of Design in the decade 1974 to 84. Because I was in NID, I can tell you the period of her chairmanship of NID was from March 1974 to June 1978. Almost the next step was to become involved with the Calico Museum. In 1980, when Calico Mills celebrated its centenary, you know the importance of Calico Mills in the history of Indian textiles, Calico Museum brought out, under the astute eyes of the creative director Matan Singh, a compendium by Marg, Treasures of Indian Textiles, with an introduction by Mulkraj Anand and a detailed paper, Textiles Through the Centuries, by the chairman Pupil Jaker, who stated at the end of the article, very important statement, by the bringing together into the vision of the craftsman, the past and present with all its demands, economic, cultural, and technological, that a new vital movement would emerge from the craft, within the craft situation, that would sustain and give life to the Indian textile crafts of the future. How very prescient and prophetic. In the same volume, Mulkraj's introduction to the volume used the title Warp and Woof, with a twist of a phrase, and I borrowed that expression for this talk to connect the past and present of the Sone Ki Chidiya, the golden bird, as India was euphemistically described. Woof, of course, is an archaic expression, but has that extra weft feeling to it as in a Jamdani sari, which I think Manisha is wearing. So, on this World Heritage Day, I would like to congratulate INTACH for the outstanding work. You have seen the kind of publications they're bringing out and the kind of work they do over the years, now having grown into a large, sturdy tree with about 220 chapters across the country. I'm also very delighted to speak in this block named after Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, another doyen who, along with two other leading lights, Aileen Osborne Vanderbilt and Margaret Mervyn Patch, who founded on 12th June 1964 the World Craft Council International. You would have seen her picture outside. I mentioned this because I'm currently a strategic advisor to this council, and therefore it makes sense for me to connect all the dots to you so that the context is understood. I must admit, as said about awards, some awards make the recipients important, and some recipients make the awards important. And I am certainly made to feel important today. Thank you, INTACH. When you are called to make a memorial speech, I would say that that is an invitation because of a certain underlying recognition of the 45 years of work the person has also done. So before I take any kind of a deep scholarly presentation, I would like to take you through some of the major, events, major observations and learnings I have sort of accumulated over my 45 years, but splitting into 4 segments. The first segment, of course, was handlooms, and then it was fashion, and then it was design, and then it was skill development, and of course now dabbling also with some craft areas. My decade with handloom started on 7th August 1977 with the Karnataka State Handloom Development Corporation, not in Kerala, but in Karnataka. And during the decade, covered most of India, including Tamil Nadu, Madhya Pradesh, UP, ending at Kannur. It's interesting, 7th August is now celebrated as National Handloom Day from 2015. The handloom industry was in the throes of change in the 70s. I used to marvel at the Mysore silks of Karnataka, the Mulakal Muru cut border saris, And the Tussar silks and Chanderi saris of Madhya Pradesh, where I worked as a marketing manager of the State Textile Corporation. Kasau saris of Balaramapuram, a part of it which you saw in the opening page. Kanjivaram in Tamil Nadu, and Benares saris and chicken curry work in Lucknow, and the list goes on. The master weavers whom I had the occasion to interact with in the Weavers Service Center and in the field had magic in their deft hands. However, one sudden, very undesirable development happened. That was the government in October 1976 made a myopic decision, triggering a downward spiral of the mediocrity across India. This was called Janata Sari and Dhoti scheme. The first task, one of the tasks which I was given in the Karnataka State Handloom Corporation, was to dispose of the accumulated Janata Saris and Dhotis. As a result of this introduction and all the kinds of things which I mentioned of handloom, the great work of master craftsmen, they took the easy path or the path of least resistance and took into manufacturing 40s and downward coarse handlooms. So from crafts to skills is actually a movement from craftsmanship of high-end skills to commoditization and perpetration of low-end skills. At that point in time, there were 3.8 million handlooms and more than 10 million people earning livelihood from the industry. Again, at that period, when all the good things were happening in terms of promoting handloom, the government took a decision to offer 20% rebate. It became the major promotional intervention for handloom, practically across the various festivals in India. All the handloom corporations and handloom cooperatives offered rebate on sale of handloom. The consumers stopped buying handloom without rebate, and Pavlovian conditioning enveloped the psyche of the customers. The state and central handloom corporations started to compete with the cooperatives in many places, and both suffered in due course. I mentioned the National Handloom Corporation, where I had worked, and that is why I had a chance to see Bharat Darshan almost of all the handloom clusters. That time we financed a film by Shyam Benegal. It was a film called Susman. It was produced in 1987. It was financed partly by the National Handloom Corporation, and later, 20 years later, Priyadarshan made a film, Kanjivaram, in 2008. Of course, the first one, Susman, highlighted the pathos of the weavers. Inspired by these, perhaps, the handloom corporations and cooperatives tried to sell handlooms on a sentiment of projecting the poverty of the weavers. This step further alienated the modern consumers who were emerging from deprivation, and consumers began to distance themselves, and several handloom showrooms eventually closed down. Handloom showrooms started selling spurious handlooms, and in many showrooms, both powerloom and handloom goods were offered sometimes from different counters, but sometimes from the same counter. The handloom sari, the only unstitched garment present in every state of India, is the best representative of India's inimitable handloom traditions. The unprecedented Vishwakarma exhibitions across the country during the late 80s and the books by Chisti and Martan Singh on Indian saris captured the diversity and craftsmanship in great detail. But saris seems to have lost the war in the marketplaces of India. Despite the National Handloom Day being celebrated, saris have not been promoted as a strategic tool for transformation. There are more than 68 crores of women in India, being 48% roughly of the population. At least 50% wear saris and 70% occasionally. But despite such an opportunity, neither the government nor the IIMs, IITs, NIDs, NIFs, and their graduates have not been able to create any evocative and effective national campaigns to encourage women in India to choose saris as their default dress code. If only they could increase their consumption of saris and use on more occasions and encourage the young generations also, our handloom industry could have probably not only survived, but would have grown dramatically. I know that there are in Mumbai, many classes taking place for young people, how to drape a sari in 30 seconds. And those kind of things are capturing the imagination of the young people. But I must say that proper campaigns can greatly result in major sales of saris. We have done two in my career. One was called Priyadarshini Sari Border Body Matching Competition. It really soared the sales in Karnataka of silk saris. Another one I did in Kerala called Kairali saris. So I am always wondering, why are the marketing gurus and marketing people in the country not paying attention to saris, which is a great pride of India? Now coming to the first IIT was set up in 1951. And thereafter, 4 more IITs were set up in the late 50s. The last one was 1961, the Delhi IIT. Of course, it was already there as engineering college. It was renamed in 58, it was renamed, and then it became an IIT. The first agriculture university came up in 1960, and NID in 1961. The Indian Institute of Management was also set up in 1961. I have said this before, on October 22nd, 2006, in a press conference in connection with the setting up of International Center for Indian Crafts in NID campus, that government should have set up a National Crafts University, along with IITs, to save the remaining hands-on skills of manufacturing and design prowess, and could have offered BDes and MDes to the weavers and craftspersons, so that the younger generations would have been encouraged to stay with the sector and would have pushed the envelope. In fact, it is important to understand the implications of this. After all, crafts are the safety belt after agriculture for providing livelihood in rural economy. Most importantly, crafts culture would have helped the young people of our country to take to blue-collar jobs in manufacturing proudly. Today, many engineering institutes openly admit that the youth are moving away from manufacturing job profiles, preferring mostly IT-related courses in service industries. When craft disappears from a society, it is likely that manufacturing will also disappear eventually. It is pertinent to mention that some experts indicate that crafts and 3D manufacturing together are creating new frontiers in manufacturing systems for the digital economy. In fact, I'm told in Spain, a large number of such parts are coming up which are using both the technologies together, both craft and 3D technology together. Even to change the manufacturing ethos and system, crafts are required. This needs to be studied by policymakers and craft enthusiasts. The handloom sector was given state corporation quotas to diversify to fashion and export garments to Western and other markets. There was a lead story in Business India where we had exported genuine handloom fall shirts to Calvin Klein, to Bill Blass, to Tommy Hilfiger in 1986-87 period, probably for the first time by a state corporation apart from HSGC in Chennai. Obviously, Festivals of India did create a congenial environment, but the golden opportunity for diversification to Western wear using genuine handloom fabrics was not carried forward by most state corporations and killed the golden goose by handing over quotas to private parties or by not utilizing them. Now let me take you through fashion a bit of time. NIFT recently completed 37 years of journey. As I mentioned earlier, the institute came into being because of the vision of Mrs. Pupil-Jaker. In fact, Sri S.K. Mishra has written in his book, Flying in the High Winds, giving full credit to Mrs. Pupil-Jaker for having initiated the idea of NIFT. It was, she was ably supported by S.K. Mishra and V.K. Agnihotri, two dynamic IAS officers. NIFT was patterned in the lines of FIT New York. Fashion is a magnetic word. It continues to be. Whether global or Indian consumers, they really do not see or differentiate all the raw materials and competing segments of the industry. That is really not their concern. They want and buy fashion, online or offline. Creation of NIFT in 1986 gave on a platter the best chance to restructure the fragmented textile industry with the unifying force of fashion. Please understand, fashion is always seen in a very narrow-minded spectrum, but it is a large concept, and it is a force which can travel horizontally across all sectors and backward through the supply chain and forward to the ultimate consumer. And we miss the bus. The rather raw material stage word textiles and the numerous councils and allied interest groups have remained in the same mold all these years post-independence, despite the winds of fashion blowing across India, even in Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4 towns and cities. Honorable Prime Minister, in his address at Bharat Tex 2024, called out the fragmentation of the textile industry and cannibalization of long-term interests. The ministry should have by now changed the name of the ministry itself, of Ministry of Fashion and Technical Textiles by now, and merged the councils to make the Board of Trade to represent the textile fashion export and retail system. Fashion has shifted gears around the world after the age of coronavirus, as Philip Kotler, in a celebrated article in Sage Journal, has called it. The stage is set for a great revolution of sustainable fashion for the next 2 to 3 decades, certainly leading up to 2047, when India will still be a nation of youth, but in the last stage, before the demographic pyramid becomes a kite, in terms of shape I'm talking about. I wish NIFT and other fashion institutions wake up to the disruptive opportunity to create breakthrough sustainable fashions by adopting many suitable craft practices which have minimum adverse impact on environment and people. NIFT seems to have fallen to the repetitive pattern of other typical government institutes with less risk-taking approach. When an institute has 19 campuses across India, one expects the management to think big and create fashion districts, creating an entire contemporary value chain, thus building a whole new ecosystem forced on innovation and employment. Becoming just an administrative machine to give out degrees is rather easy in a country with 450 million youth. I must say that they should have also by now set up a large number of fashion incubators. For our entrepreneurs, they need to really now experiment with sustainable fashion using incubator facilities. For instance, many of the people are not utilizing the facilities in the way it is expected. There are now 5 NIDs. Relevant studies indicate that India needs a big boost for manufacturing to generate more jobs. There is pressing need for transforming design curricula and pedagogy and from sustainability point of view by introducing eco-design and green manufacturing approach. I remember workshops on sustainability conducted way back at NID during 2002, apart from the International Conference on Crafts in the Globalizing World in 2006. India's first national design policy got approved in 2007 after 5 years of painstaking efforts. The time has come for developing a new national design policy focused on sustainability, as 16 years have gone by and the ground realities and context itself have undergone tectonic shifts. A policy intended to sustain and grow the design-led manufacturing industries, micro, mini, small, medium, and large, compliant with environmental, social, and governance tenets and SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, has the potential to place Indian design and manufacturing on top of the ladder. Now, coming to skill development. Skill is just a transactional word, whereas craft is a strategic concept. Craft means strength, and inherently skills which are value added with many intangibles. Skill levels are assigned numerical levels instead of competency belts to indicate the scale of craftsmanship needed. Steve Jobs and Tim Cook, in many public interviews, have demolished the assumption that it is a cost arbitrage which is attracting the investment in manufacturing units of China. They have said it is the craftsmanship combined with technology, a unique combination giving a differential advantage which make Apple to go to China for manufacturing. We seem to have taken craftsmanship out of crafts. After 13 years in skill development, I wrote a book in 2021, Runway to Skilled India. Run was R for reskilling, and U for upskilling, and N for new skilling. And this intended that intensive reskilling of the current workforce is required for about 450 million workforce. In some cases, also upskilling will be required. Upskilling for the new entrants to improve productivity, and new skilling for green jobs and green skills for workforce which are coming into technology field. We have supported and advocated One District, One Product scheme, ODOP, which was introduced in 2018 in UP to be taken up in all 500 craft clusters. PM Vishwakarma scheme of 2023, which is very imaginative and for the first time aimed at imparting craftsmanship for Vishwakarma's children of the 21st century. The scheme also aims to support high craftsmanship, quality aesthetic standards, and attempts to integrate with high value chains. This scheme can help to be vocal about local and local to global transformation. Having taken you all through these different sectors, it is good to have a flashback prior to independence before we build the case for crafts and sustainability to weave a new future for the golden birds, textile and fashion industries. Now let us see, Shashi Tharoor, as it was read, spoken by Manisha ji, in his extensively researched book, An Era of Darkness, The British Empire in India explains, India had enjoyed a 25% share of the global trade in textiles in the early 18th century, but this was destroyed. And the company's own stalwart, William Bendick, wrote that the bones of the cotton weavers were bleaching the plains of India. It was in this quagmire the British had left the once vibrant textile industry in India. From these euphoric heights of 25% share in global trade in textiles, it is disappointing commentary that we are currently at 5%, which shows that we need to think afresh a new strategy for revival and rapid growth. But I find a more balanced analysis from Dr. Ruth Clifford, a Nottingham University researcher, who argues, however, the story of decline of crafts in India has often been homogenized and generalized in many craft activist narratives. T. Roy, in 1993, in his detailed studies of Indian handloom economic history, argues that portions of the industry have fared better than others depending on local market demand, the insight and entrepreneurship of the weavers, and sustainability of design to handloom as opposed to machine. This is more akin to what I have experienced while working for the handloom industry in many parts of India. The collapse of integrated mills, owing to the disruptive strikes and other vexed issues, rapid, unfettered proliferation of power looms sounded the death knell of handlooms and the mill sector. The responsibility of clothing India's masses fell on power looms and profusion of synthetics. Hand skills, India's own abundant, diverse natural fibers, from pineapple to bamboo to banana to, you can name it, everything is in India. An environment-friendly ethos got relegated to the background. The gains from the expositions in India and overseas, presenting India's craftsmanship, couldn't lift up substantially handloom sales or increase the textile exports to the desired levels. However, the institutions grew. NIFT has now 19 centers across India. There are 5 NIDs. There are, in the last count, more than 500 design and fashion schools. Government schemes from 1990s, like the Technology Upgradation Fund, Textile Cluster Development Scheme, Special Economic Zones, Textile Parks, Integrated Skill Development Scheme, and the National Technical Textile Mission, and recent production-linked incentive, PM Mitra, and latest PM Vishwakarma scheme, along with numerous other schemes for weavers and craftsmen, have tried to hold the textile industry and handlooms and handicrafts together with efforts put in by various central and state governments. So what is the strategy which I am going to speak about? It is about becoming a creative manufacturer and marketer to the world. It would seem to me that with the economic liberalization and globalization winds blowing from 1991, the momentum created with great forays in Western economies, instead of attaining more traction, got relegated to the background. In my 3 books, Effective Export Marketing to the US, EU, and Japan, Garment Exports Winning Strategies, and Indian Design Edge by Rowley Books in 2008, as an academic researcher and industry fellow traveler, I have argued consistently that India should focus on transforming into a creative manufacturer and marketer to the world instead of trying to emulate China to become factory to the world. I must add now and make it creative, sustainable manufacturer. I have been also reiterating the positioning of India, designed in India, made for the world, as the core competitive corporate strategy. Crafts and craftsmanship will enable democratizing design, especially for a large country with 142 crores population. Today, Indian textile exports sadly remain sub-optimized, with apparel exports continues to struggle far behind China and Bangladesh. With the employment in handloom and handicraft sectors is falling rapidly and endangering the rural economy and increasing urban migration, and as well as a fall in women's labor participation ratio, which is at 29%. The world average is about 53%. And unless we push the labor participation of women, the dream of becoming a $5 trillion economy or thereabout is going to remain a little more elusive than what we think. Because in almost all the countries which have developed, the women's participation ratio has raised into higher levels. The report of the 2024-25 by the Ministry of Textiles, released just before the recent Bharat Tax, places the textile industry share in the nation's GDP at a modest 6% and exports at 13%. Further, the report stated that only by taking innovative measures in partnership with the industry and learning from experience, India could aspire to achieve 20% growth in exports over the next decade. Considering the targeted growth in exports, India should by then have a market share of 15 to 20% of the global textile and apparel trade from the present level of 5%. During this period, India should attempt a structural transformation whereby it becomes a net exporter of finished products. I strongly feel that structural reforms may not be sufficient at this stage because a strategic shift from farm to fashion is now called for. Reading between the lines, it becomes evident that the textile industry has not been able to script a winning story yet, with textile apparel exports at less than 5% of the global textile fashion trade, contributing a very modest percentage in India's GDP, despite that data showing about 45 million people earning livelihood from this age-old industry, and also about 100 million indirectly involved at some stage of the supply chain. A Craft Council of India study indicates 200 million people being involved in craft sector, with 45% of them women. In today's times, when the country needs to push up the labor force participation ratio of women, which is absolutely critical for the growth of the economy, this sector needs to continue to play a significant pivotal role, especially to become a developing country. Now, how do we leverage craft DNA for sustainable innovations? So that is going to be the latter part of this. See, instead of using ChatGPT or Google, which I have not, what I'm trying to say is that there has been a consistent thought process of the last 45 years. And what does that distill and tell me and tell you as to what some of my observations are? Having provided a helicopter view of the textile industry and allied aspects, let me throw more light on different values of crafts, which can lead to sustainable future of India and for global leadership of Indian fashion and textile industry. The team of World Craft Council and the Knowledge House for Craft teams from 2018 have been working on a comprehensive value of craft report, which is expected to be completed by the end of the year and to be released by November, December of 2024. A group of editors led by Dr. Kevin Murray from Australia is working on this. I am a late entrant to that gigantic task, but it is heartening to see that the range and synthesis of 15 different core values of crafts identified by this team are making it crystal clear that the cascading impact of craft crafts can lead to total sustainability approach, not only for textile and fashion, but also for many other industries. The report in progress demonstrates the dimensions which are closely linked to sustainability as an outcome of the value. Crafts which exist as, how do crafts exist? Have you thought about it? It starts as a utilitarian process, and number of them are ritualistic. There is a temple, there is a mosque or church. Some of the activities get related to those, spiritual or ritualistic or folkloric activities and decorative forms. But that's a very low base level with low value skills. But that can be transformed to sustainable fashions. And as you can see, these are two different ball game. If you really look at it, you need time and you need a lot of skills and creativity to go into this base level to transform it to real fashion. And I'll tell you some of the examples globally, how it has been done. Then it moves to become repetitive patterns of living, where you get associated certain products of work and life, which then becomes interesting to create that craft into going into that area. And curated luxury is the ultimate when it becomes experiential. Ferragamo or look at all the Italian designers. They have converted that into huge to become top in luxury exports. So it is a process which we need to understand and study how to monetize value, how to use crafts' transformative power to really become a powerful economic activity in the country. Designs inspired by crafts often succeed in humanizing technology and developing user-centric, emotionally enriching approaches and experiences. The generation next of designers have an opportunity to strengthen India's design edge by decoding the tacit knowledge embedded in the crafts. Design in innovation-led and creative economies is more of a strategic tool for finding out-of-the-box solutions to different wicked problems. The crafts also represent, in a way, the antithesis to individualism, with a clear focus on communities. India is full of communities, and the design is often made for individuals. And one of the Peter Buttenschorn said that we broke the beautiful rivers or the large community swimming pools which we used to have in the villages, now to make a bathtub in the room. Or we had orchestra halls, now you have Walkman or some Alexa in your room. So individualism has prevailed. The 21st century preoccupation of designing for individual delight and the dematerialization and digitalization sweeping across, followed by many undesirable consequences, can to some extent be mitigated by the imaginative use of crafts, which connect people to realize collective aspirations of the masses and elite alike. Deborah Emmett, very interesting researcher, writes, there is a global awakening of the importance of artisans and their contributions to a sustainable world. In a country such as ours, it is also the more important to place ethos of handloom, khadi, handicrafts at the core of India's design strategy, so that Indian products and services retain their cultural and emotional identity while being global and sustainable at the same time. How do you look at the future of design and fashion institutes? A recent European Commission study asserts that 80% of all sustainability outcomes, especially for textile fashion industries, are dependent on decisions taken at the stage of design. All institutions, including from school education level, which have something to do with design and innovation, need to be sensitized on crafts so that designs and technological innovations delve into the age-old sustainable practices and concepts. National Education Policy 2020, fortunately, unfortunately, it just happened before COVID. So obviously the digitalization acceleration which happened thereafter have not been fully captured. How to use really some of these aspects to counter some of the dematerialization which is sweeping across. But anyway, it is still a very good document, and the children needs to be brought into this, and it is mentioned as from school level onwards, creativity will be there, but I think it needs to be at a much more intensive level than what has been forecast. There is a 2001 publication by Japan External Trade Organization, JETRO, which illustrates the development of creative thinking based on the craft traditions accumulated and distilled from the experience of Japan over centuries. There is one big difference. We see craft as craft, but Japan sees craft as concept and translates the concepts into high, very good products and brands. That is where we see objects of crafts and the artifacts of craft, but we don't see the concept and blow it up to higher levels. I'm just going to tell a few examples. How do they use that? Japanese lighting techniques, one-piece approach for dresses, dressing styles, traditional art of origami, Zen philosophy which led to high performance in minimum space miniaturization, and minimalism, and hundreds of such ideas to bring out several contemporary products and to create many global brands. Like Issey Miyake, the brand was born in 1971. Muji in 1980. Kenihara's seminal work is one of the most expensive books to buy online, Designing Design, brings out the alchemy and process of the transformation of craft to design manifestations very vividly. Crafts can infuse concepts and sustainable practices. Khadi, handloom, and crafts could help in pushing eco-design curricula and ethical design for creation of sustainable design and fashion for the institutes and for reworking on specifications to improve durability, biodegradability, reusability, upcyclability for the manufacturers. The future of existing institutes and the shape of future organizations will depend a lot on this organic transformation by integrating sustainability at every step. It may be recalled the Japanese fashion label Issey Miyake organized in Kyoto and in New York a tribute exhibition, Khadi, Indian craftsmanship. Such is the value of India's sustainable craftsmanship as perceived by international fashion brands. An evaluation of NIDs and NIFs on the state of readiness for leadership in sustainable design and fashion education and research would be a desirable step. In fact, you will think it was something which you can postpone. It is no more postponable. It is to be done yesterday, if possible. Imagining the sustainable future of Golden Birds, Warp and Woof, which is our last part of this discussion. State of Fashion 2024 McKinsey report holds the textile and fashion industries to be responsible for up to 3% and 8% of the global green gas emissions, respectively. Another report estimates the CO2 equivalent emissions by the textile industry annually at 1.9 billion tons. The fashion industry also adds to these alarming statistics. Such reports have made fashion industry to be targeted by environmentalists and green warriors alike. Of late, taking cognizance of the emergence of circular economy and also due to concerted initiatives by leading global brands, there is cradle-to-grave approach gaining wider acceptance among industry players to trace and measure greenhouse emissions. The problem, somebody was asking me, why is it difficult to trace? Take any garment, and you will see that it has to go through different stages with different vendors. Some process of dyeing, some process of buttonhole making, some process of fixing buttons, some places where you are ironing or whatever. The processes are taking place in different places. So traceability is a very tough question on the garment industry. And that is where the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, including the Higgs Index, which gives you in the label the actual rating, like a star rating of the garment. Single-use plastics abandoned, you must have all seen by the retailers. As experts have obtained, I like this, this particular definition. Sustainable fashion embraces three revolutionary ideas. To green the industrial machine processes, to repair social and business practices, their ethos, the value systems which are guiding some of the industries will have to be rewritten, and to create a new way of viewing and living fashion. Priority for creation of manufacturing jobs in India for the next decade is highlighted in the India Employment Report 2024 by the International Labour Organization and Institute for Human Development. Sustainability was considered an optional choice until recently, but now it is a must-have matter. Eco-designing, green manufacturing, and environmental, social, and governance compliance are bound to drive the future. I have seen the list of the new regulations which US and EU have prepared on sustainability. More than 30 new regulations are ready to go. And the sustainability regulations on the anvil in both US and EU are expected to mandate textile fashion exports to strictly comply with the rules. Measurement and traceability through farm to fiber, to factory, to fashion, to foreign. The Honorable Prime Minister has coined this word, if you recall, in 2018 summit in Gujarat, in Gandhinagar, of carbon and greenhouse emissions will persuade the manufacturers to reassess all the specifications. The dramatic change in characteristics of consumer behavior in the age of coronavirus, those who are students in this room should Google and read this larger version of Philip Kotler's beautiful article on age of coronavirus, will have a far-reaching impact with slower fashion cycles and mindful consumption. A greener horizon is visible for us to see. Brands like Adidas is using digital traceability platform to achieve material traceability at scale. More brands are joining in sustainable apparel coalition, and big brands like H&M, Nike, INTACH, Levi's are already leading the pack. An unprecedented opportunity awaits India to position itself as the ultimate sourcing destination. I don't think any other country can claim this kind of a background. All the Vietnam and Cambodia and Bangladesh and China cannot really claim what we have, our ethos from the days. I just read, I was very happy to see in LinkedIn an article by a NIFT faculty on Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, and sustainability, and linking it to fashion. Obviously, Mahatma Gandhi had the highest semiotic sense in design, and everything could be conveyed in that form. And that is why, probably that article was written. And we have that ethos in the country of reuse, recycle, and durability of many things which we use and passed on from mother to daughter, etc. But unfortunately, we are not using this to project into the sustainable textiles and fashion. Lip service won't be enough. Action on the ground is the need of the hour. All the constituents of textile industry, including educational and research institutes, need to work in an orchestrated manner towards this specific goal. The success of craft-led sustainability mission, this is very important. This is my request to anybody from the government to take this message. That is, the current craft-led sustainability mission for textile fashion industries will necessitate the recent Vishwakarma scheme of Government of India to be expanded beyond just craftsmanship training, skill training, to become a new vehicle to integrate various components of textile ecosystem towards sustainability. When I was looking through the textile ministry, I was very happy to see one additional secretary given the line of sustainability to look after. And even in the Bharat Text, you will see textile, fashion, and sustainability as 3 headings. But I am telling that the scheme of Vishwakarma has the potential to become the complete ship to carry this entire initiative through. As we traverse the Amrit Kal, leading up to 2047, the 100th year of our independence, the living tradition of sustainability and practices and fine hands-on craftsmanship of handlooms and handicrafts can be the most powerful arsenal to make a positive impact in innovation-led and creativity-centered economy, enabling India to emerge as a leader in the global trajectory of textile and fashion. I would like to conclude, more or less, the time is running to 45 minutes already, 50 minutes. Time for creative leadership. Let me conclude this discourse by quoting Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, who came for our 25th convocation at NID on 5th January 2005. He concluded his convocation address by asking the question, who is that creative leader? What are the qualities of a creative leader? The creative leadership is exercising the task to change the traditional role from commander to coach, manager to mentor, from director to delegator, from one who demands respect to one who facilitates self-respect. The higher the proportion of creative leaders in a nation, the higher the potential of success of visions like Developed India. This was the quote. Our traditional crafts, as well as the legacy of textile industry, have the prowess to reach new heights, but we would need to create a breed who believes in nurturing an environment to blossom crafts and craftsmanship with talent, tolerance, and technology. 3 T's, which Richard Florida's 2 books, if you read, The Rise of the Creative Class and The Flight of the Creative Class. Both this, he has used this concept of talent, that is attracting talent, and then nurturing them, and then having an environment which is conducive. So talent, tolerance, and technology, paraphrasing Richard Florida, a line for taking a giant leap forward. After all, to imagine the future of Golden Bird's Warp and Woof, we require creative leaders with vision and passion, both of which Mrs. Popul Jaikar had in abundance. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I will be very happy to take any questions which you may have. Yes, Dr. Lal. Yeah.
Fantastic presentation, of course. Involves a lot of research and study, which is appreciable.
Thank you.
I have one observation or question, whatever you say. All said and done, whether fashion and sustainability can go together.
Whether it can go together.
Yeah. Fashion and sustainability.
You look at the damage you are seeing into the environment. You can see it in Dubai floods or the tsunami or, the kind of, weather is, even if it's by a degree, how much of sweltering heat we have generated. What is the option? The landfills, the kind of, some people put a counter argument by telling what is the percentage of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It's a very interesting question. It's less than, of course, less than 2%, as I understand, much less than 2%. Now, the argument, therefore, they put is that if so much of carbon also come, how does it matter when atmosphere? But that is not the right argument. The entire issue is that it's not only about fashion. It's about a way of life. Sustainability is a way of life. It is not just about the clothing which we are wearing. It has got an important thing to do. So obviously we can start with what is visible to people, others will follow. And that is how the whole impact happens, So I was just projecting, for example, saris have a great opportunity to project the sustainability to the world. I mean, world, when at least India itself has 70 crores of women. So where do you want to go? So it is not about, whether it can go together. We have to make the entire system to practice that, to make them aware. Everything is possible in India, provided you communicate. As we have seen, many ideas have come and planted themselves in the hearts of people. So why not? If Mahatma Gandhi could really create such semiotic communication to people to take on, and we can see the current Prime Minister is a great communicator. So with people like them, when they communicate, it has got tremendous impact. Even I think the Textile Minister did put on her social media about saris for some time. So it all has its impact. What I'm telling is you need to take the plunge and create. Where else will the leadership come, Dr. Lal? When we are struggling, when Sri Lanka 30 years ago stood up and said that we are going to produce garments without guilt. That was their, as you will probably know, garments without guilt was their slogan. They said they will not use child labor, they will not exploit women, they will have proper working conditions, they will have environment managers, and they created a decent, very quality-oriented garment system. After the Rana Plaza tragedy, the world spent a lot of money in Bangladesh, and Bangladesh changed. It's now $60 billion. We are struggling at 16.7 billion. So obviously we can reach much farther heights, no doubt about it. But we have to take one idea and go after it for some time. At least sustainability has that potential. Yeah, yes, Satyan. Yeah.
What's your take on, let's say, the Chanakya initiative from the viewpoint of both the ethical practice as well as sustainability? The whole issue relates to the shift from mass production to mechanized hand production in the name of empowerment and name of sustainability.
No, when we started using, for example, khadi was what? It was hand spun yarn and with handmade charka and handmade fabric production. But when we took machine made yarn and made into handmade production. We called it handloom. And then it became powerloom, completely automated. So obviously people have made their own definitions. But as I said in the Japanese case, we need to examine the spirit of certain things and make our philosophy. You know, just look at origami. How did Issey Miyake create $1 billion empire? Just by that single concept. So that is where I think we can probably look at, instead of finding shortcuts to circumvent an idea, how do we really go after, something which is more akin to a sincere, a more honest approach or a mindful approach to the entire thing? That is my question.
Considering that, we are going to be, and we are the ultimate source, resource for the world. I mean, how do we actually sustain certain ethical practices where the potential creativity of each and every individual is not subjugated, to pure labor?
See, that was done in China, but Indian labor was never like that. In a garment factory, you can ask people in the garment industry.
When you have Dior coming in and using, the so-called sort of manpower from Chanakya, and they sort of creating these huge, sort of paintings from the artists. I mean, how do you really look at it from the ethical viewpoint?
Well, see, you will be able to probably answer better because you must have had some ideas, I would say that whether it is Agnivir, whether it is Chanakya, the idea is that we should make people to live with the talent, tolerance, technology. We should be able to harness all this together and give people freedom to grow. That is very important.
No, but that is
Madam, I'm sorry, I'll have to cut in there. We really don't have time for discussion, long drawn discussion. Maybe one last question. Yes, sir.
Dr. Koshy, thank you for a wonderful exposition on the relationship between sustainability, fashion, and design. But I think relationship between design or fashion and sustainability is a bit of a myth, because I think it begs a bigger question, and I feel it's actually about new business models. And I believe infinite growth of any company and the kind of finickiness where new fashion, new designs come about every few weeks is the real problem. And I think we need to address the business models that the design companies and or the garment companies or the fashion companies are exploring, rather than because it's the design in the business model which is the problem and not technology per se. And that's if you could elaborate on that, your take on that.
No, I think, each one sitting in this room is such an expert in their own fields. I don't want to contest in that manner, but I want to answer it in, Mayank Mansingh Kaul, who is a textile critic and a curator, who was a student of NID while I was there, very gifted person. He held an exhibition, as you recall. It made waves. It is called Inspiration and Influences, 1947 to 2017. And he also made a speech in the Bombay City Museum. So there, he made a very interesting observation. I don't want to name the designer he quoted in that presentation, but what his point was that there is a big distance between craft and design. And that is not, by showing craft, you should not mistake it for design. It's like Frank Gehry telling that don't take my doodles as the design. So it is something like that. The craft is an inspiration, craft is the DNA. But if you think that craft putting up is a design, you are sadly mistaken. That is often some of the designers have been doing. And he quotes the example of a designer who uses a particular design without the parda, which should have been the case in the original, traditional way of that particular craft. So the issue is that we have to see craft for what it offers as the concepts for sustainability in its practices, in its tools, in its approach to fellow human beings, in its human centricity, in its interface with people, in its dealing with. You just look at how Seva used to deal with the women managers, the confidence which you see in their eyes. So I think, it is a question of how we can There is incidentally, your answer may be found by Googling also. There is a new school which is being set up by a group of NID NIFT graduates called the Handloom School, THS, in Madhya Pradesh. They are combining business models with craft, design and business into a new model. It is still too early to write a commentary about them. But the whole idea is exactly what you asked. How do you create new business models around this concept of sustainability, but drawing inspiration from craft, converting that into real, what we call as design, and then leading to new business models. But we have not seen enough examples, really speaking, yet. But maybe the THS could be an interesting green shoot in that direction.
Thank you, sir.
One more, somebody was, just last one. Yeah. Yes, sir, please.
Sir, how should we revamp the understanding of fashion? Like in terms of we're talking about sustainability, fabrics, textile, everything. But at the core of it is the very basic day-to-day understanding of fashion, where we would just assume that someone wearing clothes, that's fashion. So how do you think that should be revamped? Or how can it be revamped at a public level?
See, the attack started when Zara and H&M and people like them said that every 2 weeks a new collection will be brought in, as you know. So the overconsumption and overproduction. And if you keep on overproducing and you are having less discretionary income to purchase, there is going to be large amount of rejections and things which land up in, most of them are not upcyclable. If it was upcyclable like some of our original textiles, probably the result would have been different. So what has happened is the reaction or backlash to fast fashion has actually accelerated the sustainability call for fashion. Now, how do you make it practical? Practical is by only measurability. If you can measure and quantify something, then it's probably possible to control. But since there is no measurability, often we are just left to speak in good English, but not really having. That is why I would consider what I saw in Hong Kong when I first met Higgs Index, HIGGS, Higgs Index. They have been able to measure and trace. That is what I mentioned about Adidas. They are now using software platforms which can actually measure scalability of material. So you start with raw materials, you start with processes, you start with the results. So it is a process. So everybody puts together, and let's assume that out of the garment exporters who are mostly small scale industry, they are not operating in large scale. So they have the possibility of taking this forward and saying that, look, we are going to set up, many people are beginning to do, and I would like to accelerate. That's why this call for fashion institutes have a role, the manufacturers have a role, design clinics of NID have a role. So if there is a collective awakening, there is possibility of these business models becoming practical, and people will start looking at the label. We are now going to a supermarket and looking for organic food. My wife says that, I want this papaya from Wellgate, a place in Trivandrum, because we believe that it is made without much chemicals. I think large number of people are willing to pay a premium for 20%, 10%. So why not that cannot happen in fashion? Because after all, it's touching our body. The perspiration, the pores of the body are all touching the dyes and chemicals and what we wear and how people perceive these garments. So I think it is possible. It's just that the will and determination for the entrepreneurs to take it on and, as a challenge. We have taken up many challenges in India. India has changed and advanced so much. I don't think it is I am very sanguine about, do not get a mistaken idea about my speech that it is critical. But critical is about being sanguine about the future, to take a step which is very close to my heart. I believe crafts provide the great, and if we can set up 3D manufacturing with craft together. We set up the first 3D machine when the President of India inaugurated it on January 5th, 2005 in an institute. So obviously it is possible that 3D manufacturing and craft come together. Start using craftsmanship. In fact, I met Tulika of Jaipur Institute of Craft and Design. I said, why don't you change the name of the institute to Institute of Craftsmanship, rather than just calling it craft? Because people get the idea, oh, ye purana cheez ka kaam hai, craft. That is not how it is, Spacecraft, watercraft. So all these words came from a very, very exalted concept. But skill is very, very minute form of it, So I believe we need to start looking at fashion is time. Without time, there is no fashion. So if you can convince people from the earlier times that is relevant in the current period, everything changes. Thank you very
sir.
much. Yeah.
May I request Member Secretary INTACH Dr. C.T. Misra to give a small token of our appreciation to Dr. Koshy. Ma'am, please come up on stage. Sir, I'll request you to move the center stage to... Sorry, it's from the other side. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
You have this copy, I'll give you.
So on behalf of the entire INTACH family, I want to thank Dr. Koshy for delivering a powerful and riveting lecture. It was sad to learn of so many misses in the handloom sector, but hopefully with the remedial steps that he has suggested, things will turn around and we will be able to resurrect the golden birds, Warp and Woof. With that, I want to thank all of you for coming and supporting us. Have a good evening. Sure. Thank you, sir. Much appreciated.